Today here we've got Sandy Wickman. I've worked with her for many, many years, and she is our GP product manager and also does consulting as well. This is a session, matter of fact, that when I was back at GPUG, I invited her to come in as a subject matter expert to do at GPUG Summit, and it was a hit. And so we are going to bring it to you today, and it's Show Me the Money, an in-depth look at accounts receivable for Dynamics GP. Sandy has many years of experience, been doing this for around 16 years. What's also fun about this presentation is she's been on both sides of the table. And so she has been both acting in a user capacity, but also as that consultant. So very, very excited about having it. And I also want to congratulate Sandy as well. Something that's new out in the market moving forward, Dynamics Pro is an organization that does Dynamics GP certification. And matter of fact, Sandy was a part of the first team that was certified, and Lorna on our team was a part of the design team. So want to congratulate her. What that means to you is that she is certified and has passed the test in knowing Dynamics GP well. So really am excited about that certification for that. Took a lot of work, and it is a tough test out there. Now, we use GoToWebinar for our technology. This is being recorded, and we will share that recording with you, so you can go back, listen, and also let other folks within your organization hear it as well. On the right-hand side, there's an area for questions. Everybody is on mute so that we have a great listening experience. So if you've got questions for Sandy, we're going to kind of jump around and make it fun here and ask questions during today's session, but type those in, and we'll make sure that we get those addressed. So with that all being said, I am so excited. This is my first webinar here at BMI, and I am excited about handing it over to my teammate, Sandy Wickman. Let's learn more about AR. Sandy, I can see your screen. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks very much, Kim. I appreciate that. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to be with us today. I'm pleased to be able to present this webinar to you and share with you some of my experience about what makes the AR solution useful and how you can enhance your ability to be able to provide value to your company. Show me the money. Remember this guy? Cuba Gooding Jr. from a movie that I'm sure most of us have seen. So the idea here is that he wanted someone to be able to show him the actual money before he was able to make really significant decisions about moving forward in his career. So I suspect that there's often opportunities for you as AR professionals and accounting professionals in your organization to be able to prove out that there's some way to be able to collect on funds, see the money as it's coming in, and then be able to give information to your upper level management about where you stand on those collections and those type things. So our agenda today, we're going to do some best practices first in terms of setups, and then we'll look at transaction best practices and ways that you'll be able to transact those accounts receivable type activities. We'll look at inquiries, and then lastly at reporting. So we will have a little bit of pause there in between with questions, and if you would please go ahead and send those questions in to Kim. She'll be fielding those, and if you try to keep your questions based on the format that we're on, so if you have questions about setup, ask those questions at that point. Transactions, ask questions then, and so forth. And then we will, of course, have time for questions at the end of the webinar if we didn't get to one of yours during one of those specific sections. So our first part of our setups that we're going to look at relates to setup best practices. So depending on your security settings in your GP environment, you may not have access to all of the things that I'm going to navigate to and show you in this demonstration. But if you're aware of the options that are available to you, then you can make recommendations to those who do have the required access so that the settings can be set for a more productive role in your environment and a more impactful in your company's contributions. So we're going to look at several things. To have a default lookup per user, per company, reminders used to immediately inform you, several features on the card records that we're going to need to look at to make sure that we've got the things set to be able to accomplish our goals. We're going to look at payment terms, and there were some new features that were added in GP 2015. So we'll take a look at that. Cash receipts. In GP 2015 R2, there was an ability added to be able to auto-deposit the cash receipts. So as you know, the cash receipts currently in prior versions were 2 steps. You do the cash receipt, and then you do the bank deposit. So I'm going to show you what the pros and cons are for being able to do this auto-deposit in 1 step for cash receipts. We're going to look at finance charges, the statement ID options, and then collections possibilities that are available for you. Okay, so I'll leave my my slide deck there and go ahead and jump right into GP. This is GP 2015 R2. And what I'd like to point out to you is right here on my home page, I have some information that's really important to me as soon as I log into GP. So as an AR professional or as an accounting professional, there's some things that I can see here, including in my Business Analyzer pane over here, I can see my top 5 customers by my year-to-date sales. So a really important KPI, or key performance indicator, that I can see right off the bat. Who are my top 5 customers? So if I were to choose to have a promotion or something, I could certainly make sure that these get targeted and that salespeople are giving the adequate amount of attention to these top 5 customers. Then I have scroll buttons here on that particular pane of my home page that I can move forward to next reports. So I can have pie charts that give me similar information, as well as accounts receivable days outstanding detail. So days outstanding is a report that we get a number of requests for and is available based on this Business Analyzer pane, but also in SSRS reports, which we're going to look at in a few minutes. And then receivables turnover. So a number of these KPIs are actually available and delivered to you out of the box in this GP 2015 R2 environment, and it's just a matter of getting that deployed. So Interdyne would be happy to help you with that if you have not deployed those yet. These are great things to have on your homepage to give you instant information. Then over here on the other side, on the left side, I have my to-do area where I have some reminders here that are giving me information about some things that are important to know to start my day. For instance, the customers that are over their credit limit. So I have 7 of those customers, and I need to not just know that I have 7, I need to know who they are. So clicking on that icon takes me to a list that opens my smart list and tells me immediately who my 7 customers are that are over their credit limit. But not only that, it shows the credit limit amount, their current balance, and there's their phone number so that I can just right from this list get in touch with those customers and make arrangements to have that over the credit limit addressed by those customers. I also have an indication here, and I can either have them set up as queues, which is what these top 2 are, or they can just be in a list of my customers that are on hold. And just from that one click also opens the smart list and shows me which customers are on hold. So I can determine whether they're ones that I need to be aware of if they're in my group of customers. Okay. So then back to our best practice setups. One of the options that was on our slide deck is the default lookup view per user. So each user could potentially have a lookup view that's different than any of the users that log into your company. So we're going to switch to our sales area page here. And I'm going to start out just by opening my customer record in my cards section. And in this, I have then the option to click on the looking glass, which opens my customers and prospects. Now, because I typically, as an AR professional, work with customers that are in a custom group or class that's called Illinois, I have set my default view so that all of my customers belong to customer class that includes IL for Illinois. So when I'm looking at my customer list, I don't see all of my customers. I see only the customers that I need to take action on or would need to be able to do transactions for, which means that I have far less to have to navigate to find just the ones that I'm looking for. So in order to set this view as the custom view for me, I can click on this down arrow and set as the default view once I've selected the view parameters that I choose. Now every time I open this window, I get this group of customers. If for some reason I needed to go back to being able to see all the customers, I can choose that from this list as well, and now I can see all of my customers. So it's not permanent. I don't have a restriction that would keep me from being able to see others as necessary. So within my card records then, I want to be able to look for some specific details on that particular card. So I'm going to use my advanced paper company here quite a bit today. We're going to look at some of the things that would be important to know in terms of accounts receivable. So for instance, on my Options tab, or button, I have an indication here that my finance charges are a percent finance charge at 1.5%. So an important thing on finance charges is that this is based on an annual percentage rate. So if I have an 18% APR, then I would want to enter 1.5% on this line, which is 18 of the percentage divided by 12 months equals 1.5. So I have an 18% APR with my customers, which means 1.5% finance charge. Then I also have credit limits on this pane. So my credit limits I can set up as either no credit, unlimited credit, or a specific dollar amount. Then going back to the original card record, I also have the opportunity to be able to indicate some grace periods down here. So my payment terms may allow some discounts, and in that I can allow discount grace periods such that if someone's payment is received a day after the discount period, I may tend to just give them grace for that and allow that to be taken as a discount. Whereas if I have it set for 0, they're given no grace period and the discount expires on the actual day of the discount set up in the payment terms. I also have a similar kind of thing with due date grace periods. Email, the email button gives me some details about the email that might be sent to that customer, as well as this globe where the internet addresses are stored, and being able to use these email fields to be able to email documents to my customers. You may be aware that this note field, this notepad, as it relates to this specific customer, can be used for notes. And in legacy versions of GP, that was really the only place that we had to put that kind of thing. As of this 2015 version, we have this attach button that also gives us the ability to be able to do attachments that can be from scanners, that can include different kinds of documents. So you can have images, you can have Excel worksheets or Word documents, and all of those now, as of this attachment feature, are being stored in the SQL database. So it's not just a record like we had in the past where a note was held in a shared file location. These attachments are actually held in the SQL database. So then next I wanted to talk about payment terms. So you'll notice that this window looks quite different than it has in prior versions. We actually have now the ability to be able to calculate days from a particular transaction date. We can set the due date. We can set the discount dates. We can calculate the discount on different things, whether it's just the sale or the discount and freight, miscellaneous, and tax. And then also at the top there we have this calculate button. So if you have a specific scenario for payment terms that you want to be able to see how it will calculate what the payment terms are, you can use this window to say, here's my transaction date, and if that's my transaction date, when would my due date be, when would my discount date be, and how much would my discount be? So you can see whether or not your terms are set up the way you need them to be before you wait for a customer to actually need to use them. Okay, cash receipts. So auto-depositing cash receipts can be done in our setup for our company. So I'm going to navigate then to my company area page. Okay, I'm going to take the long way. I'm going to go to Tools, Setup, Company, and Company. Then to the Options button here. And at the bottom of that list of options is a new option to automatically post cash receipt deposits. So the benefit here is that you would then only have to do one transaction. You would only do the cash receipts and it would automatically post through your bank as a deposit into your bank account. Now the drawback is that each of those cash receipts would then post as a single deposit in your bank. So there's no more that ability to be able to group the checks together to equate to one deposit that your bank would receive. So this may not be the right choice for everyone, but it is a nice feature for those who do have the opportunity to be able to do a one-to-one where the cash receipt becomes a single transaction as a deposit on your bank reconciliation. Okay, then on the statement options, we have the ability to be able to create different statement IDs. And those IDs are very much like what we use for report options, where we save a group of criteria so that you don't have to walk through setting them up every single time you do statements. So within my statement IDs, I have 3 different statements set up. In my case, I've got them set up as which form they're going to use, but that's not a requirement. They can be set up with IDs of whatever you choose. And then I have within this then blank form ID set all of these defaults in place so that I don't have to make those choices every single month when I run my statements. Okay. And we're going to look more at statements when we get to the routines section. Then lastly, in my setup section down here, I have in setup and receivables. Then on the options button, I have several different things that I can set up here as my details that I would need to be able to see in doing my transactions. So for instance, in some cases the sales invoices and so forth have very many zeros in the documents, more than I'll ever need. So as a startup or even as a later procedure, it is possible to go in and shrink that down a little bit so your document numbers aren't quite so long, which is sometimes a very useful thing to be able to have. Oops. I also want to point out that there's 2 new options on your receivables management window: the display over credit icon, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute, and then warn if a customer is over their credit limit. So in past versions, we had a pop-up screen that would come up as someone was doing a sales transaction to tell them that the customer was over their credit limit. But it wasn't coming up until you got farther along in the document. So you might actually be taking the order and have it come up as you're doing your first line item. This display over credit icon actually shows up in a number of different windows but comes up earlier in the process. So you can see whether a customer is over their credit limit before you get down to those line items. Okay. So let's go take a look at that really quick. So if I open my customer window and I navigate to Central Communications Limited, I see on my customer card a yellow caution sign with an exclamation. That means this customer is over their credit limit. And I can see it here. I can see it in the sales transaction entry window, as well as a number of other places. Okay, so that takes care of our setup best practices. So Kim, did we have any questions come in on that section?
Actually, we do.
Okay.
So here is the first one. In a case where you have thousands of customers, is it possible to change the payment terms for many customers via an import-export mechanisms instead of doing it one by one?
Good question. And the first way that we recommend doing that is you can roll those kinds of changes out using the class records. So you can update it on the class, and then when you change the class, it'll ask you if you want to roll those changes down to all the customers in the class. However, you should be really careful about that, because if you have customers in a class and you've made individual record changes on the individual records, then rolling those out with the class could cause other changes to happen. So the other options are, if you have an integration manager, you can update them that way. And in some cases, you can also work with your partner to have those kinds of things updated across a group of customers using the SQL database changes.
All right. So there you go. That's where it's really important to work with group folks like Sandy. Here's another question. This is more general. Where can I download the presentation? Following today's presentation, you will get an email where it's going to direct you to find that information. All right. Here's another one. I'm sorry I didn't catch where the cash receipt auto deposit was located at. Can you let me know again?
Sure. It's in the company setup. So let me jump back over here. So if I navigate through my GP button, I can go to Tools, Setup, Company, Company, go to the Options button at the bottom, and then scroll all the way down the list to the very bottom one, which is that automatically post the cash receipt deposits.
Awesome. No other questions in the queue again. As Sandy's going through today's presentation, type them over on the right-hand side and we'll get them addressed. Go ahead, Sandy.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, so the next section that we're going to look at then is transactions and routines. So in this segment, we're going to consider what can be done and what does removal mean. So there's some places where GP has some wording that could be a little bit confusing, but actually is just crossing over different kinds of areas where different things could happen based on setups. So those setups become even more important that we looked at the beginning. If you need to enter a finance charge for just one customer, you might want to use the Receivables Transaction Entry window and use the finance charge document. So we're going to look at that. So Sales Order Entry, SOP, Sales Order Processing Entry, and the Credit Limit Indicator. I'll show you that on the SOP transaction. We looked at it on the customer. We're going to look at aging your receivables, assessing your finance charges, printing and emailing statements, and then cash receipts, so we note that auto deposit option we talked about before. Changes to posted transactions, what can be done, and then that paid transaction removal. What does that mean? What does that do? Okay, so back over here to GP. We're going to start by looking at our sales order entry. So in the sales transaction entry window, for the sake of time, I'm just going to look up an order that we already have in place. And you can see right off the bat that that customer has gone over their credit limit because of that icon. So even though I'm not keying in a transaction like I might have needed to do to have the old splash screen come up that say they're over their credit limit, I can see that right here just by opening the transaction. Okay. Then in the transaction entry, so this is in receivables transactions down here a little bit lower, the transaction entry, I want to point out that there are a number of different document types here. So there's debit memos, there's credit memos, and there's one here called finance charges. So if you have only a couple of customers that you assess a finance charge on, you might want to open the Receivables Transaction Entry window and simply do a transaction in a document type called Finance Charges. It gives it a unique number so that you know that record when you see it in your receivables, and it does the same functionality on a much smaller scale than doing the finance charges as a full routine for a number of different customers. So in the routine section then, we have the aging process. So you might be thinking, when I run my age trial balance, it already is putting them in the right buckets. That's absolutely true. The receivables aging process is another option that's available for you for a month-end kind of an activity. It actually does go through and look at the document dates and verifies that they're in the correct bucket of time, and also prints a report at the end of its process. So if you put this into your routine monthly processing, it just makes sure that all of those buckets have all the right values in them and prints the report for you. Doesn't take very long to run it unless you've got tens of thousands of customers, and is one of the options that you can include in month end as opposed to simply printing the report. The aging date can be month end. In this case, I only have account types of open items in my system, but I can leave it set for all. That way it will pick up everything. And then I can restrict it to particular customers if I choose to, and I can also indicate which kind of report I want, the detail report, the summary report, or even no report. Assessing finance charges also takes place here in the routine section under finance charge. I also have the ability to do this based on a navigation list if you choose to do them that way as well. So the last finance charges were assessed on this date. You can do this based on a group of customers, which you can do by ID, names, or types of customers. You can do it by classes. So if, again, you have your customers set up so that each customer service person or accounting person has a group of customers, like my Illinois group I looked at before, you could set that so that each of them do this finance charge process only for their group of customers. It's suggested that you leave this marked to print the register because it'll tell you what finance charges were assessed. The finance charge option at the bottom says, do you want to apply a minimum finance charge? So for instance, if they're delinquent on an amount, but the finance charge is going to calculate at 1 penny, maybe you don't want to assess a finance charge. So you might set a minimum finance charge in that field to be something like $1 or $5, and then anything under that limit will not assess a finance charge. And you can also do that with a minimum balance as well. And you can include balances that are older than the bucket that you choose. And these buckets would appear based on how you've set your aging buckets up in your accounts receivable system. And then you'd click the process button. Okay. Then printing and emailing statements. We'll go back to our statements here in that routine section. We could look up an ID that we've already created, and then based on the setup that you have in your environment, you would be able to use this email options, the messages, and this email button to be able to send your statements out by email. Now obviously that email address that we looked at in our setups for the vendors is going to be crucial to be able to get these statements out to the right people. So you'd want to be sure that that was all set up first, and then you could be able to put that into place. So what changes can you make to posted transactions? So over here in my transactions area, I scroll to the bottom and I see that I have posted transactions as one of my options. So within this, I have the ability then to be able to do certain actions like I can see my original amount, my document date, the check number. I can void things in this window if I need to void them. Be sure that you look at the void date and the posting date so that it doesn't impact closed periods. And in this case, I can also take this document. This was a finance charge that was assessed to advanced paper, and I can, in this window, choose to waive that finance charge. So if you've assessed a finance charge and then decide that they were close enough to their payment date, you would use this window to come in and waive that finance charge. And then lastly, in the paid transaction removal, so that's in my routines section, down here at the bottom, paid transaction removal. So what does removal really do? If I have my accounts receivable set up to maintain history, then this paid sales transaction removal moves transactions from the open records to historical records. If I am not keeping history, paid sales transaction removal actually takes the transactions out of the database. So a really important distinction. Paid transaction removal doesn't actually remove as long as you're set up to maintain history. Okay? So then once you get the transaction removal window open, you have several different choices, including some down here that relate to non-sufficient funds checks. So in our system, in our GP system, we have the ability to go back to a check that was returned for insufficient funds and put it back in the aging. And it's a simple transaction as long as you haven't done the paid sales transaction move to history for those NSFs. So GP has given us then a cutoff field so that we can move this back, say 30 days or 2 weeks, such that the bank is given enough time to be able to identify whether it's sufficient funds to cover the check before we do this transaction removal process. Similar kind of thing with the checks. So most best practice would be to say backdate these NSFs and these checks by 30 days each time you run this so that those transactions stay in the open tables until you're sure that they can be moved to history. Be sure you leave your print register set so that you get a register at the end to show what's happened. Even if you print that to file, you can, or to the screen, you can then see the effects that the paid transaction removal has had. Okay, Kim, questions on that section?
Yes, Allison asked the question, can the over 30 flag be placed the same way as the over credit limit flag?
It cannot, not currently.
Okay, that's the only other question.
Okay, very good. So our next section then is going to be about inquiries. How do I see where I stand with my customers and my collections efforts and those kinds of things? So there, I'm going to show you some places that are kind of, in some cases, less than intuitive about where to find some customer summary information and finance charge information, and then customers by transactions by customer, work open entry. We're going to look at some SmartList details. SmartList Designer can be used to add tables and SmartList go-tos. We'll look at the average days to pay and the last payment date. So back to GP. So we're going to start with customer summary. So in the cards section, yes, cards section, is a button or a choice called summary, which is really not necessarily a card record, really kind of is an inquiry. So I'm going to start by looking up my customer again, the one we've been working with, which is advanced paper. And within this window, I can see when the last time was the aging was run. I can see all the unposted transactions for that customer. I get a little mini aging. Isn't that cool that you wouldn't have to run the report every time just to see the details if you're on the phone with that customer? You can see those details right here in that customer summary. Then down here at the bottom, I've got 3 columns of information. My year-to-date, which includes numbers of sales, numbers of paid invoices, the sales, the cost, the cash received against them, and even what their high balance was for that year-to-date. Similarly for last year and even the life of this customer. So if someone asked you in your environment, what customer have we done the most sales with, it's possible for you to use this kind of a window to be able to get that information, or if they asked how many for a specific customer, even easier, just bring it up and choose that customer. Then this summary view gives us an option to be able to do something even more. So I can also choose that I want to see by calendar year, and then I could choose a particular period. So my test system is set in the 2017 year, so I could say I want to see from month 1 to month 2, and then calculate that, and it'll give me 2 months of information for this year, last year, and the life to date. Okay. So really super helpful information. Then at the bottom of the window is also a finance charges button where I get to see the unpaid finance charges, the last charge for that customer, the amount, and then again those 3 columns of year-to-date, last year, and life-to-date for that customer's account. Then back over here in the inquiry pane, I've got my transactions by customer. So using my advanced paper, I can see all of my transactions, including those that are in work, those that are in open, and those that are in history. So work is those that have not been posted. These are posted and unpaid and not yet moved to history, and those are the history ones. So I can choose any combination of these check marks and redisplay the window to see only the details that I might need to see. So in this case, I'm looking only at historical documents. I can see only open documents. Notice that this one here has the little star next to it, which means it's been voided, but it is still in open, so my paid transaction removal hasn't moved that to history yet. Or I can see only my work. Okay. Smart List details. So I have added my Smart List access to my header bar here so that anytime on any window I can open my Smart List by one click from the header. So anyone who might like to get a little tip about how to add Smart List to your headers, send in a request and we'll make sure that you get the instructions to add a Smart List to your header bar. Okay. So the Smart List details that are available include under that Sales tab and under the Customers a number of different things, including the average days to pay. So I can see then from my customers, including my advanced paper customer, all in a list, the number of days on average that it takes for them to pay their invoices. How helpful is that to be able to take to a sales meeting and be able to say, these are the customers that take the longest to pay their bills. How can we improve that? These are the customers that pay their bills the most quickly. How can we offer them discounts? Okay. Then these smart lists within this this list can be in the Smart List Designer. We can modify these smart lists. We can search on those smart lists. We can add columns to those smart lists so that we can have even more information that makes sense for us to be able to have in this list. So again, I could add that customer class to this list so I could take this and even hand it out to those salespeople or those customer service folks so that they each have their own individual list of those average days to pay. Okay. That I also wanted to mention that that average days to pay, if you were looking at it on a single customer at a time, you can also get to that on the summary. I'll look my customer up. and on the credit summary button down here at the bottom, I can get that average days to pay year to date and life to date. Forgot to mention that when we were on that list before. Okay. And then the last one is in our inquiry under payment summary. I'll look up my customer again. I have the last payment information on this window as well. So if you choose to give access to just an inquiry window for that kind of detail, you've got the last invoice, the last payment, the last statements, the highest balances, average days, NSF information. So this one's a really good one to be able to make available to your salespeople if they go into GP, because there's nothing in this window that they can change. It's truly an inquiry window. They can use this to be able to get up-to-date information about the accounting information for their customers. Okay, Kim, any questions on this section?
Helps if I take myself off mute. All right, we have a number of questions. This first one comes from Patricia. In the customer summary, where the period dates are located, can you drill down to find out what invoices are in the 30-day bucket?
That's a good question. Let's go look. So let's see about our 181 and over. So the answer is yes. So I clicked on the blue link at the top based on the selection that I made within the scrolling window, and it opens up to show me all of the transactions that make up the dollars for that specific item.
Then can you just explain here, Sarah asked the same questions you just went in there, but where is the summary or the customer summary located? Just point that out for her.
Okay. In the cards section under summary.
Ta-da! All right, Mike has a question. Is there a way to set the default for the open history and work to be all clicked on?
They should be already. When you go to transaction by customer, typically they're all marked as soon as you open the window. If that's not what you're seeing in your environment, send an email to support@interdynebmi.com and let's see why yours isn't opening that way.
And Sandy's following up on your suggestion about adding Smart List to the header bar. Can you give her direction on how she should go about doing that?
Yep, Kim, could you collect any of those who are asking for that, and then I'll follow up on them after our webinar to show how to do that.
You bet.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if we've got any other questions. I don't think we do right now. Oops, never mind. It just clicked on it again. Thanks. Okay. Good, good. They're following you along. All right. Can we assign customer accounts to AR rep for collections?
So collections is one of the, so the answer is two parts. Collections functionality used to be one of the included modules with Dynamics GP. It now has gone back to the ISV who developed it, and so in terms of actual steps and collection routines and letters and templates and things like that, that's an ISV offering. And in that, you can absolutely set them up to be different collectors who take different actions and steps through a process. Without that ISV product, there's not any official action items to take in terms of collections, but you can set up smart lists for people to be able to do based on criteria in a smart list so that they're working from a list of customers with their open balances.
And again, on that one, if you are unsure, if you registered that module before the upgrade, it's in the older versions of Dynamics GP. If you're unsure, you can get a hold of Sandy or myself, and we can help you out in figuring that as well. All right. Here's I'd like to know too how to set up Smart Lists, and that's Patricia. All right. Thank you, Patricia. That's great. Let's see what else we got here. All right, Allison as well. Writing down your guys' names. Me too. All right. Looks like there's other folks. So excellent. I'm
Cool.
glad you are
Yeah.
making that offer. Here's a question for you. It says, is it possible to email order confirmations to one email address and the invoices to a different email address? If so, how do you set that up?
It is. So sales transactions where orders go to one particular address and invoices to another address. So part of that can be driven based on the addresses that you have in your records. So the customer addresses can include different, let's see, this one, can include different email addresses on the specific address ID. So if you have an address ID that says orders versus invoices, then you can pick that based on the transaction document that you bring up so that you can send to the email addresses that are on that specific address record.
Excellent. All right. No other questions in the queue right now.
Okay. So we've got about 10 minutes left. Good. All right. So the last section that we're going to cover then is about reports. So how do you report on this? How do you let others in your organization know how to see the money? So we're going to look at reports. We're going to look at to print reports that have to be done routinely. Can they be published for those who need to see it without my participation? So if everybody needs to be able to open the report when they want to and I don't have to run it every time, how do we do that? And can standard GP reports export to Excel? What alternatives do I have? So SSRS reports and agings, we're going to look at those. Which aging do I use for which purpose? GP standard reports, reprinting posting journals, sending statements, which we looked at pretty much already, and then Excel reports. So back over here to our demo environment. I am on a internet web browser page, and this browser page is where I have deployed my SQL Server Reporting Services reports. So they're often referred to as SSRS, that's the acronym. And in this environment, I have deployed all of the out-of-the-box reports that come from Microsoft when I deploy GP. There's lots of them. So first I'm going to go to my company called TWO, and then I have all of my different modules, purchasing, project, payroll. So depending on which modules you're licensed for, so we're going to look at the sales. So the very first one up here, notice that I have something called charts and KPIs. So within that folder, I have all of these different things that are charts and KPIs that I can use to be able to give my my salespeople, my C-suite people, even my sales team information about where we stand in graphic formats. Okay. Then I can go back to my sales documents, and I have all these different sales reports. So notice that I have a couple of different options for my age trial balances here. So there's an age trial balance detail, there's an age trial balance, historical age trial balance, so there's a couple, and then the accounts due, a couple of different agings, but what's great about these is they go out to Excel, right? So when I click on my historical age trial balance here, it gives me at first a whole group of selections that I can make. Print it as, age it as of when, start and end dates, if I want it based on posting date, right? All these different choices. And then the only ones that I have to choose something on if I want to restrict it are the sort by and the sort documents by. So anything that has a select value, I need to select the value, so I want to sort it by name, and I want the documents to be by document number so they're in order. And then view the report. So give that a chance to come up. And then I can close this top section. And now I've got a really great aging that should match exactly what I see in my GP standard reports, but I can go and take this out to any of these formats, Word, Excel, PDF. I can put it into all kinds of good formats, and notice that it's a little bit nicer look than what we have in the GP reports. So SSRS has a number of reports, lots of KPIs, even our agings that you can use. Then I'm going to switch next to the Excel reports. So when you use the later versions, GP 2015 and R2 of GP, you have the option in Smart Lists to publish your reports to an Excel report. That means that anybody who ever needs to open that report could go right to a shared place on Excel and open the report and refresh the data, and you don't have to be involved in any of the transaction. They can go get current information and not have to call you. Imagine how much time that would free up. So all they'd be doing is going out to one of these Excel reports that are published to a particular location, and I would pick one that doesn't have any data, darn it. How about past due? How about that one? We know there's some past due. So I have a couple of customers then that show up with past due information and even the aging buckets that they're in. And on the Data tab is a refresh button that anytime they open this, if they just leave it open all day and work from this as a queue, they can refresh the data and it goes and gets the new data out of the SQL tables and puts it back in this Excel spreadsheet so that they can keep working on it directly from there. So we're just about out of time. I want to be respectful of our time limit. So the only other one I wanted to point out quickly is the reprint statements. So if you do produce statements in your environment, be sure you use the reprint statements if you need to reprint one for someone. If otherwise you're creating new statements with new dates and new parameters as opposed to reprinting a statement that you already produced and sent to your customer. Okay, Kim, back to you.
All right, we do have another question. Amanda asks the questions, how do we determine in our system is set up to maintain AR history?
Great question. So there's a couple of places that can be set. The top level is at the setup, but there's also, for those of you who have access to customer records, can see whether the history is being kept on the options button. Maintain history should show up for every one of your customers. And there is a way to set that at the highest level so that all of your customers get created this way, but this is a great thing for you to be able to go and check on a customer by customer basis.
Esmeralda asks the questions, is this option available in GP13?
Which option would that be?
Well,
The
it was at
SSRS maybe?
1155, I believe.
So that's probably the SSRS reports. And yes, there's more reports as you go up in versions. So they've added a number of different ones to the library.
And Patricia has that follow-up on the SSRS, and it's asked, how is SSRS accessible? We use send a link, and that's really a reporting tool. So what would you suggest there, Sandy? Have them follow up with you or our services or consulting group? What would you recommend there?
Yeah, I would suggest that they have it, they go through services because it has to be deployed
Yep.
and they're set up to be able to be done first. So
And just like MR for general ledger, SSRS is very popular, especially if you've got SQL gurus in the house. They're going to love it. It's an excellent reporting tool. Esmeralda, same, that was about SSRS, so good insight there, Sandy. No other questions in the queue.
well, very good. We finished on time. Kim, thanks for helping keep things on track. I very much appreciate your time today. Thanks very much. We please do look forward to additional webinars that we'll be doing that Kim mentioned, and we'd love to be of service. Let us know how we can help you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sandy. Always sure appreciate your talent. We are blessed here at BMI. Also, again, I'm new to the team, but I'm Kim.Peterson. That's with a T and an O. And get in touch with me. If you've got educational needs or tools that you've got, that's what we're looking for, feedback. And also, I do ask everyone to fill out that user heartbeat survey. It's really good for us to get feedback from you on what your experiences are and what your needs are. Sandy?